Hi, this is Len Edgerly. Welcome to the Kindle Chronicles podcast. Today is Friday, November 18th, and I am recording in Cambridge, Massachusetts. This episode has the second of two interviews that I did while I was out at Amazon headquarters in Seattle last week, and my guest for that session, which I did the day I flew back, was Chuck Kronbach, and he is Vice President Worldwide Publishing for Amazon, and as you'll hear, he has quite a lot of areas of responsibility. We met in a conference room of the Day One building, which is next to the Spheres in downtown Seattle. This is a building that I don't think I've been inside it before. The last time I was in Seattle, I was in the Spheres for a product preview, and when I had been at Amazon 2012, 2016 to talk to Jeff Bezos, it was the Day One building, but it was at a different place. It was further away from the Spheres. So the name has traveled with the updated building. And this is a tall building. I guess we might have been on about the 6th floor. And it was a very simple conference room. It still looks a little bit like a community college, but not quite so spare as the one, back 5 years ago or so. Some electronics available, a screen that you could show things on, and but pretty simple table, good acoustics, and a chance to visit with somebody I hadn't met before at Amazon who has a really interesting area of responsibility. If you are listening to this, as I think many of you do, it comes out on Friday and you listen to it Saturday, maybe with your coffee, you will be listening on an important day in the life of the topic of this show. It will be the 15th anniversary of the introduction of the Kindle on November 19th, 2007. And that was the day that Jeff Bezos introduced this new product. I wasn't there, and I didn't start the podcast until slightly about a year after that, less than a year after that, in July of 2008. But it sure was exciting to see this new product and also the introduction of KDP. So glad to be doing this episode the day before the big anniversary. And I'll tell you at the end of the show about some things that I've also done I talked to somebody from CNN, and they're going to have something at CNN.com, I think tomorrow, about the anniversary, and maybe some of the comments from the interview that I had with the reporter. Let's turn to Chuck Kronbach, and the first question I asked was just to get a feel for what are his responsibilities as Vice President Worldwide Publishing.
I work with Kindle Direct Publishing. I also have Amazon Publishing. I have Comixology, which is our digital comics business, and a couple others. So it's an interesting mix, and a lot of fun businesses to work with.
Tell me a little bit about your background. Were you in publishing, or what were the steps that led you to this position?
No, I'm a longtime Amazonian. I've been here for over 15 years. I started in finance in Seattle. I moved into the marketing organization in Luxembourg. I made a little mistake and left for a few years. Missed it a lot and made my way back. Came back in a fashion role where I actually worked with a subsidiary, and then eventually found my way to Kindle. And I've been with Kindle and now books for over 8 years.
Huh. That is a career path.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things about Amazon is that you can, if you do well, people will give you all kinds of opportunities.
Yeah, my dad was in finance. He ended up running a bank in Boston. But what kind of a finance position did you have?
So if you can believe it, in 2004, you could get the entire technical team that ran the Amazon website in one room. And I was the finance person that supported that team. So it was everything from the shopping, the cart, the personalization, search, everything. So yeah, it was a very different time.
Was that your first job out of school, or what?
No, I've been in consulting before. I graduated with an MBA, and so kind of made my way here.
Yeah.
A friend of mine had joined earlier and kept telling me how much fun he was having.
Yeah, I did notice there were like 3 years where you did a couple of other jobs, and I was thinking about that and saying, well, because I worked at a gas company for a while, and I could picture that if, and I was enjoying it, to leave and then come back is a very unusual opportunity in some sense. And did in the period away you sort of learned things about Amazon that you didn't know while you were here, and when you came back, was it with a sort of a new take on the thing? The company changed dramatically in 3 years when you left? Or?
No, I think what I realized when I left is that there are good and bad about every company. I really like the good of Amazon, and the bad doesn't bother me very much. And so, going to another company and going to a startup, I just wasn't surrounded by the same level of enthusiasm and the same level of focus. There was more politics and sort of worried about how people looked as opposed to worrying about what the customer needs. And so, I found myself using Amazon leadership principles in meetings outside of Amazon and realizing that the other people in the room just couldn't relate or couldn't get on board. And so, when I came back, I definitely knew sort of the value that I was going back to, and was very enthusiastic when the opportunity arose.
Did you ever do any 6-page memos when you were a consultant in between?
I did it in between, and so it's a really funny experience because those 6-page memos, and more than just the 6-page memo, but the dedicated time to read it in the meeting is so important.
Yeah.
And trying to get people to do that, because everyone has good intentions. Good intentions always fail. No one pre-reads. Yeah. Everyone's busy. Everyone's trying. They want to. And so some of those mechanisms are really important. And trying to get people to do that when they're not surrounded by other people who understand it is very difficult. Because in this example, for example, you go into a meeting and you sit in silence for the first half an hour.
I love it.
It's great, but trying to get people outside of these walls to do that is, it's swimming upstream.
Well, now, I've been so fascinated with that right from the start when I first heard about it. Say you've got a group and you're thinking about a new project, something in your area. Someone has prepared a 6-page memo. Do any of the team have any of the team seen the memo before they walk in the room?
Yeah, it depends. There's a whole gamut, right? So by the time, for example, my boss sees a memo, a lot of people have seen the memo.
Okay.
Right? But early on with product managers and the team, a lot of those early meetings, it'll be everyone's new to the topic. So.
And they're reading it in silence, taking notes as they go. They're all sort of sharing the initial encounter with this idea that's been mapped out. And I mean, I'm a meditator. I do a lot of meditating, and my experience is when I take 5 minutes and close my eyes and meditate, just a simple method, when I come back, I seem smarter. Things are just a little fresher. And I wonder if there's a similar kind of an experience, especially with a group. You are reading, you're not closing your eyes meditating, but you are in silence. There's nobody speaking, nobody exchanging words. And so those first elements of the conversation afterward, does it feel like they're higher quality than if everybody just rushed in and they'd, scanned the memo on their phone in the bathroom?
Absolutely, and that's exactly why we do it, right? And whether it's meditation or whether it's just dedicated focus time,
right?
You really are able to read it, think about it critically, and there's no rush, right? We don't start until everybody's ready.
How do you look up and
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of, whether it's you look up, you can sort of see people, they'll put their document down, or they'll pull their phone out. You can see that they're done.
Okay.
And then even when we're all online, we have a hand raising activity that we do, and when everybody puts their hand down, we know it's time to go.
Man, I love it. Okay, well, let's go back into some of these areas. Kindle Direct Publishing has been something I've been fascinated with all along. I've helped my sister do, I haven't actually gotten to be somebody who could be relied on to do it from start to finish and have it work well. We've worked with editors. But it started 2007, the day the Kindle came out. I think in retrospect, that's kind of a genius awareness that Jeff and the team had, that not only were they creating this new hardware that was kind of magical, but they were taking the first steps to a whole new ecosystem of authors connecting with readers. What's your sense of the originating vision that resulted in KDP having the same birthday as the Kindle?
Yeah, I think it's a classic example of if you create a set of tools and you make it available to creative people, you have no idea what you're going to get, right? And time again, one of the things that keeps me at keeps me with KDP is that we create new tools for authors and they run with it in ways that we never envisioned. And authors are having success with this program at so many levels, right? So people don't know, but there are blockbusters like The Martian, like 50 Shades of Grey that have come out of the program. There are thousands of authors that are making a living now, with this program. And so no matter how you define success, like this tool set that we unleashed and have continued to innovate on over the last 15 years, just continues to even surprise us with the success that it's having.
Yeah, I've interviewed a number of people, including Andy Weir I had on the show at one point, and fascinating story. The one that I tend to think of the most is he writes science fiction. He was a tech startup guy, and he wrote books. It's A.G. Riddle, Jerry Riddle, and I visited with him in his home, and I've seen the life that he's now leading as an author who's making a living from his books, because of KDP. And now he's got some publisher relationships overseas and things like that. So you tend to think, oh, the success, the money, that's great. But this guy is so creative, and he brings so much of himself into these stories. And he's self-taught, he didn't have an MFA or anything like that. But man, just one person like that, and you can probably multiply it by thousands of times at this point.
Yep, and there's one of my favorite things is reading author feedback, and I love to hear the stories about was living paycheck to paycheck, and my husband bought me a used Mac, and I've turned it into a publishing juggernaut. But there's again success is by authors is defined so many ways. There are also authors that just said, hey, I wrote this story about my father's life, and 12 people bought it, and I'm so happy. And just breaking down the barriers, letting an increasingly diverse set of authors publish, and just letting them tell their stories just creates all kinds of success.
Yeah. Jeff had early on, and Rosecrans and others, the vision of having every book ever published in any language available for reading on a Kindle in 60 seconds or less.
Yep.
And is that even possible? Is it still in sort of the culture of the Kindle team to be aiming at that?
Absolutely. Is it possible? I don't know, but that's what makes it a great mission, right? And so you get a bunch of, intelligent, motivated people to just continue to work and chip away at that goal. And the great thing is 15 years later, we moved beyond it. So that's still the benchmark, like that's still the bedrock that we're aiming for. But we're not satisfied with every book published. Like with Kindle Direct Publishing, we've actually created a way for many news stories that never would have been told to now be available, in under 60 seconds, anywhere in the world. And so we're going to do that. And then, oh, by the way, you have this great problem that you create for yourself when you have so many titles. You then have to spend time helping connect the reader to the right set of books. So, we started with that. That continues to be the North Star, but like the great thing is we're able to layer on additional missions on top of it.
Yeah, you kind of made the original mission harder with KDP because you keep adding to the number of titles that you have to keep track of. Amazon Publishing is another thing I've loved right from the start, and one of my favorite chances to understand the impact of that was interviewing Dean Koontz a number of times. And right from the start, he's a little older than I am. I think he's like 75, hugely successful author. He said that the youth of the people on the APUB team, the creativity, the sense that they were not afraid of the future, they were actually just sort of embracing it. And he described it, I think in some of the publicity, that it was like a new lease on life for him as an author to be working with this team. And I guess I'm curious, since that's part of your area, how have you done that? How has APUB managed to create such a perceptibly different culture than Dean Koontz and probably others have in other places, more traditional places, older people. But how does his story fit into what you're trying to do at APUB?
So first of all, I'm super happy to hear him say that, right? And we have to make sure that people like yourselves and others hear it, so that more and more authors continue to understand the experience that they would get if they considered APUB. And I think what it starts with is it starts with hiring great people who are creative, and just everything starts with hiring the right people. And then you create the right mission, and everything at APUB starts with the happiness of the author. I mean, authors care so much about their stories, right? They're very personal. And so everything from the way that you help them take it out of their head and turn it into a real digital book or a real physical book, being super careful and thoughtful with your editorial, being really engaged with their vision when you're creating the cover work, the cover art and the other creative elements. And so really being focused on that. And so I'll give you an example. One of the things that the team will actually do is they'll manage their response times to authors almost in a way like customer service. Like they'll have a service level agreement, how quickly they get back, right? That's a delighter.
A delighter, what's that?
It helps delight.
Is that a term that you use?
It's like how you make people feel good, feel supported, and not just like acceptable, but like delighted by the response.
It's a great word.
And so it starts with the book creation, but then making sure that authors understand that you're working as hard as you can to get those books in front of people, right? And so one of the great things about APUB is they've experimented and they've developed new programs like Amazon First Reads. All of our books go into Kindle Unlimited. We're very active in Prime Reading, and that's all so that we can create a following for the authors, not just readers, but really like a following, people that are waiting for the next title to come out. And then, at the end of the day, we spend a lot of time even trying to take care of like the basics, right? Making sure that we pay them every month on time, right? Making sure that the reporting is super transparent, easy to understand, complete and accurate. And so, you just want to take it all the way from the beginning, all the way through the life cycle, and just, keep them happy. And continue to innovate. If you're doing the same work the way you were doing it a year ago, you're probably not thinking about it hard enough. So.
The other thing that the dean said that surprised me is how delighted he was with the hardcover versions of his book. I tend to think of APUB as mainly digital, Kindle, but he said that the paper, the way all the different aspects of it, compared with what he was used to with his previous publishers, it was just noticeably better.
That's great.
Amazing. Amazon Crossing is another great story. That started in May of 2010, and this is where you're taking books published overseas, finding a translator, getting them into English. And what I noticed, and I just I'd be curious if it's still sort of the way you're looking for the books, these will be like a bestseller in Turkey or something, not necessarily a more literary-driven sense of what should be translated into English. It's what are people reading all over the world, and let's make it available to the U.S. And I think a while back you became the largest publisher of works translated into English in the U.S. Is that, you still sort of have that distinction?
Yeah, that's continues to be the focus, right? Like, so everything's, continuing with Crossing. They continued along the lines of innovation. They continue to sort of look at opportunities and evolve. So one of the things that they've launched I think it was in 2019, is Amazon Crossing Kids.
Oh.
So in addition to just looking for what people are reading in other countries, it's what are some great interesting kids books that selection that we can translate. I think at this point we've got authors from translations in 30 languages from 50 countries, and that number is just going to continue to grow. There was a really interesting one that I heard about recently in the Amazon Crossing Kids, where it was written by someone, I think his name was David Aguilar, and he's missing a portion of his arm. Ooh. And so he wrote his story about building a functioning prosthetic out of Lego blocks.
Oh my God.
And so that's like, that's great.
He actually did that, or is it an imaginary thing?
No, he did it, and he wrote the book about it.
Wow.
And so that's one of the, to your point, these aren't like high literature, these are just really engaged and relatable books that people are finding and translating and making available to a much broader audience.
That's amazing. I've got grandsons 9 and 7 who are big readers, and I love the idea of them having a chance to read a book that had been for Chinese kids or somewhere in Africa as part of just broadening their view of things.
Absolutely.
Can you say which of, I think APUB has 15 imprints at this point. Is Thomas and Mercer sell the most books, or what can you say about the differences among the imprints and which ones are to maybe take up most of your time?
Yeah, well, actually, we now have 17 imprints. So that number continues to grow. Who's selling the most really depends on the date and time. Who's released a big book lately. Colleen Hoover had released a book in January, and that book has been the most frequent book on the top of the Kindle sales charts. Wow. Melinda Leigh reached 13 million customers, 13 million readers this year, and we have over 90 authors that have reached more than 1 million readers.
Are these mysteries, romance?
All across the board.
Those are staggering numbers.
Yeah.
There was one that I liked because I have an MFA. I tend to think of myself as a literary guy. The literary imprint. What's the name of that? That's Little A.
Little A.
Yeah. Is that still going? And
yep.
And there you're looking for literary authors. That's kind of a loaded term. Who's literary? Who isn't? But what's the mission of that particular imprint now?
Yeah, I think it remains the same. Like you said, it's to find sort of the, I don't know quite how to qualify it, but to sort of find the more, the higher brow title. Mm-hmm. And what I think is great about APUB is it runs the gamut, right? So it goes from romance all the way, and hits mystery and thrillers, hits sci-fi, and everything in between.
Early on, Russ Grandinetti was one of my most frequent guests from Amazon, and he was in charge of Kindle content in some of those earlier years. And I remember him saying, probably soon after APUB was started, that a goal was to actually change publishing, that it was, they saw their opportunity to be not just to do a good job and, as you're saying, please and delight authors, but to show how things can be done in publishing in a new way that might ripple through the industry. And is that still an aspiration of yours? And have you seen any examples where things that started at Amazon Publishing have, in perhaps a quiet way, changed the rest of the industry?
Yeah, luckily, or not luckily, I'm not from the publishing background, so I don't know, I don't spend a lot of time, thinking about publishers outside of Amazon. But, it's absolutely a goal of ours to use APUB to experiment and improve the way that publishers can relate to authors, publishers can reach readers, and so again, participation in Kindle Unlimited, and really going to demonstrate that you can both be successful there and then have that turn into a la carte sales and ongoing reading and future return visits of those readers. Things like that remain part of the North Star. We also have tools for authors and publishers like print on demand, where if you have a backlog or a backlist and you don't want to print it, you can just give the files to us and we can print a professional, identical to a book that you would get from another kind of printer. And APUB participates broadly in that. Yeah. And we're using those as test cases to provide the information to other publishers to say, hey, this is a great way to keep your books in stock. Particularly in tumultuous times like this, where there are supply chain issues, paper issues, working with us. And so again, APUB continues to do that. I can't really answer the second part of your question, which is how much impact is that having, but it continues to be part of what the team is trying to do.
Well, it's a natural effect of the innovation. If you just keep innovating, there's going to be impact because you're doing things for the first time, and good ideas tend to spread.
Yeah.
How about the KDP process? I think that, when I have helped my sister do a book and things like that, it was pretty easy, but I'm on the computer all the time compared to my sister and my wife and things. What have you done in perhaps a general way to make it easier for an author to publish a book using KDP? I mean, how do you know when you're winning that battle, and what would you like to keep improving on that front?
I think my team has a mentality of we're always behind, right? And we kind of create that mentality on purpose. We have a meeting every month where we get together. There's probably 50 of us in the room or on the call these days, and we read what's usually more than a 20-page document of verbatim feedback from authors.
Wow.
And we use it to dig deep into specifics. If we start to hear a thread or a theme, we dig into it. We also use that, for example, to guide our prioritization of what we're going to go work on, what we're going to fix.
Would these be KDP authors in that meeting?
Yep.
Yeah.
KDP authors that have provided feedback either to our top author group, or they've provided feedback via a number of options that we collect. We have people that go read our discussion forums and pull out themes and put it into the document. And so what that's turned into is a whole range of improvements. Everything from very small things like improving the language, the help language, so that people can understand better, more clearly what they need to do, all the way to really, I think, big additions for authors. For example, we have a self-service tool now that authors who write in series can actually tell us which books are in the series, what order it's in. It was an automated process before that had errors, and so authors sometimes would have to file a ticket to get it fixed, and so we've just gotten ourselves out of the way, and we're letting the experts on what the series information should look like give us that information. We've also launched A+ detail pages. So it's a richer set of information that authors can now put on their detail page about the book. So you can put series information, you can put additional images of your book. You could write information about the author. And it's a classic example of one of those things that we didn't really know how authors would use it. And we've just been really impressed with the creativity that they've put into it. We allow authors to self-nominate now for deals. We allow them to self-nominate for inclusion in things like Prime Reading.
Who will be self-nominated for a deal that their book was going to be discounted in a way that could increase sales?
Yep, discounted, included in some of our notifications about Kindle daily deals, Kindle monthly deals. Yeah. So it's largely a self-service platform, and we want to keep it that way. At the scale that we're working, we almost have to keep it that way. But we continue both in the minor details of the title setup workflow, as well as just the tools that we're giving them. We continue to innovate. Since you mentioned that you've helped other people do this, the other thing that I really recommend is the KDP forum. There are a lot of very knowledgeable, very interested authors that are on there regularly, and they have very good answers to questions. They respond quickly. We have some moderators on our team that also look through it to make sure that issues are being addressed, but the community really is, takes good care of itself and takes good care of other authors.
And is it kdp.amazon.com? How would you get to that forum?
Yeah, it's kdp.amazon.com, and then there's a link to the forum at the top of the page once you log in.
Great. Wow, that's a useful tool. There's been so many great experiences of Vella, where you can create your own series. I read Hugh Howey had one of the most popular ones to start. It was just fascinating. He's sailing around the Caribbean and falling in love and doing all his Hugh Howey stuff. And I love that he was one of the first people to do it because he's an innovator. When you look ahead, where are you looking for new innovations? How do you filter? There's so many different things you could work on. You've got a talented team. Do you have a way of figuring out which things you're going to try next?
We do. We always try to start with the reader and work backwards to a solution. And, for example, particularly, pre-pandemic and now again, we were hearing, for example, that, readers had less time. And they found themselves, their opportunities were waiting for the bus or standing in line. And that's really where, for example, the idea for Kindle Vella came from. Mm-hmm. And so, as I look forward, I think we're just getting started with Vella. And there's so much more to come, right? And so what we've built so far is we've built the ability for authors to write and readers to very easily find and get notifications and updates when new episodes come out. Mm-hmm. But I think the next part is really going to be the social aspect. Ah. And so we've started down that road. When the author writes a Vella episode, we've given them, for example, the ability at the end to break the fourth wall and in their own voice talk to their readers.
I love that.
And it's super fun with how authors are using that already. Mm-hmm. We've created the ability for authors to poll their readers. And so between episodes, they can actually ask a question.
Do you want to kill this character off or not?
Should I name the dog Fred? Like whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
And so that is the beginning of the social interactivity. And we have, without tipping our hand, we have a lot more planned in that area. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how we can help redefine how authors connect with readers, how readers connect with each other, and I just remain really, really excited about that. We're just getting started, but for example, at Amazon, we've already paid $10 million to authors for their participation in Vella, and we're getting some really good traction both with authors and readers.
I think that's such an interesting one because early on, in fact, my first guest on the show back in 2008, Baratunde Thurston said, I love the Kindle so great. There's going to be social reading. We're going to be sharing our highlights as we're reading a book and all this. And that stuff didn't ever really take off. And I think the problem was reading is kind of an individual thing. That's why we love it in the midst of all this chaotic world. But I think the Vella model, where the social part of it is kind of in between the author's chapters, and so it's a more active place for a reader to engage with an author if they think they're actually helping the author to tell the story. But I think it's a real subtle thing to figure out how can you engage people reading, and that just strikes me as one that's very promising.
Yeah, I think this idea of social reading is one that you really have to take a sort of step back and kind of view it as a broad continuum. I mean, we're seeing tons of information. We're seeing tons of success on TikTok, right? With book influencers who are generating a lot of interest on certain titles that they find exciting, and that sort of demand generation is certainly a social part of reading, right?
Yeah,
Finding your next book, and then I think Kindle Vella, as you point out, because you and I are both reading the same story. We're both waiting for the next episode to come, so there's a natural time for us to chat.
Right. Yeah.
But even if you take a step back and you look at long form, we've recently launched Amazon book clubs, and there's an example. Sarah Gelman, the Amazon Books editorial director, she runs her own online book club, right? Sarah Selects, I believe, is what it's called, and. And so that's another example where people come together, as part of their reading journey and our social. And so, it is one of those things. And you point out the example of, you mentioned the example of like I'm sharing my quotes and my my highlights and things like that. And people absolutely do that too. But I think we're still just chipping away at what's going to be essentially the killer app for reading that really brings the social to the forefront. And I ultimately think it'll be a bunch. It'll be some helps with discovery, some helps with just the reading journey, some helps you find again your next book. So
it might be sticky notes on the scribe.
It could be. I've got my pre-order in. I'm waiting for the end of the month.
Yeah, I think I get one next week for a review copy, so I can't wait. Kevin teased me yesterday because we were in a room like this talking, and sort of on the scribe. He says, "Well, do you want to see it?" He says, "You can't run it, you can't touch it, but I will let you hold it." Man, it is so gorgeous. It's so thin.
Yeah.
That's a very exciting innovation. Tell me a little bit about your reading. Different devices. I read sometimes. I'm reading magazines and newspapers more on paper than I was. When I started out, I was just diehard, everything's got to be digital. But now I get the Sunday New York Times delivered on paper, and I draw on it and stuff like that. So from paper all the way on, how would you describe your reading tools?
So I'm pretty much a complete convert to digital. So I have my Paperwhite with the purple cover that my daughter got me, and then I read a decent amount on my phone, particularly when I'm doing Vella. I like the form factor, and it's just, I find it much more comfortable. My mother gave me a hardcover book for Christmas last year, and it was an improvement. At least she didn't give me a crock pot for the third straight year. But I didn't enjoy it, right? I didn't enjoy the reading experience, and I actually ended up buying the Kindle version of the book so that I could tell her honestly that I read it, so you could say thank you. But just that feeling, when you're reclining or something. So I'm pretty much a convert, but I definitely move back and forth between the Kindle and my phone. So.
And have you read any good books lately, or what's on your Kindle these days?
Yeah, so I went through a heavy Eric Larson phase. So I read, a number of his nonfiction books. I recently read Shantaram.
What's that?
It's an epic book about a convicted criminal that escapes from prison in Australia or New Zealand, and then moves to India and becomes part of the criminal underworld in Bombay.
Wow.
And if that doesn't grab your attention, but it's epic. It's 900 pages, or something. So it was good.
A standalone, or is it a series?
It's evidently there's a second one. I haven't read it yet, but evidently there's a second one.
Yeah.
And I just finished Jonathan Franzen's Crossroads.
Oh,
Crossroad.
That's the latest one from him?
I think so.
Yeah.
It was also very good.
Yeah.
And then, because I'm in between now and I have to figure out what I'm going to read next, I'm actually reading an interesting Vella story called Darkened Night. If you read the first episode and it doesn't hook you, he writes it perfectly so that, the last sentence right before you have to go to the next episode just grabs you.
Ooh.
It's the perfect, execution. It's also super interesting because it's a character study of a character that's in the world of one of his KDP series.
Oh.
So it's a great example of how authors are using Vella to augment their book business and sort of make the worlds that they've created even richer.
Wow, that's amazing. Comixology, I'm a member. I like that. Let's just a couple of minutes. What's the most exciting thing you're working on there, and what's coming?
So. The biggest thing is we've gone through a process over the last year where we've taken a lot of the Comixology capability and we've built it into the Kindle app. And we're just, I continue to be excited about that because we both want to take care of the really hardcore comic fans that Comixology has served really well, but we also want to, introduce comic reading to the very, very large Amazon reader base. And so I think taking a lot of the innovation from Comixology, like guided view, the ability to have these, beautiful high definition books, and moving that and make it available to an increasingly large group of readers is what I get really excited about.
Yeah, some of those, I read on an iPad sometimes, and the guided view, it'll pull up the panel in full thing, and you just want to stay there and look at it.
Yeah.
It's art.
It's art, absolutely.
Anything else that we missed?
I'm good, thank you.
I've been speaking with Chuck Kronbach, Vice President of Worldwide Publishing at Amazon. Thanks very much, Chuck.
Thank you.
Nice guy. And really enjoyed getting to know Chuck. I always learn a few phrases or terms when I talk with someone from Amazon, and the one that will stick out in this is when he talked about something being a delighter. And of course that follows the vision statement of Amazon being the most customer-centric company in the world and the relentless focus on the customer, which is it's a slogan. It's real. It's part of the culture, and it translates into actual ways of talking. But that's the first time I'd heard somebody talk about something being a delighter. The other thing I noticed in this conversation, which is a parallel with some other people that I've followed through the years with Amazon, is starting out in one area, in his case finance, when the company was quite small, and then ending up running all of the the publication, the publishing business. And what you can see in the Amazon culture of this is, as he puts it, it's a place where if you do a job well, there's a pretty good chance you're going to be offered a chance to try your skills in a completely different area, one that maybe you just like to try yourself. Another one that has the same theme in my experience, one of the first people I spoke with in the PR department was Sarah Gelman, and she had moved to Amazon from a publishing job in New York City. And she did that job great. She was terrific at helping set up some interviews for me and just other assistants from the PR department. And then she ended up heading up the group of people who does book recommendations. That was a woman named Sarah Nelson had done that before, and she'd been on the show a number of times. And it's kind of a dream job. They sit around and they read all these great books, and then they make lists of, the best books so far this year and the best in mystery. And so I'm sure that that's kind of a delightful place for her to end up since she came from publishing to begin with. I'm going to be talking with A.G. Riddle, Jerry Riddle, sometime in the next couple of weeks when we've got to see how this Sanibel situation shakes out. At this point, I think we have the electrical equipment ready for being turned on, but there has to be a city permit. We're still waiting for a roof. I'd like to think we might be down there by December 10th for the rest of the winter, but we'll just have to wait and see. But as that unfolds, I've been in touch with Jerry Riddle about wanting to talk with him about his latest book, Lost in Time, which is a terrific read. There's time travel in it, and there's his usual drawing on real science to propel a gripping story that has something to say about humans and life and things that matter. Jerry's pools run pretty deep, and so that's going to be fun, and I was glad I had a chance to talk about Jerry's work with Chuck as well. In coordination with the 15th anniversary, I was asked if I would be willing to help out a couple of reporters that might be working on stories about it. Alex McClure, the PR guy, said that somebody from Axios and then someone from CNN might be reaching out. And I did hear from the CNN person, Samantha Kelly, yesterday. Had a nice phone conversation, and she's working on a story that she said would be probably at the CNN.com website tomorrow, Saturday, the day of the 15th anniversary. It was fun. She had good questions, and it was fun to recall my 15 years of covering the Kindle and be able to help out. I haven't heard from the person at Axios yet, but I'll look forward to that as well. When I get this up on the nets, I'll be heading out to Concord, Massachusetts for a delightful rendezvous with old friends. This is three people who I knew in second grade in Wayland, Massachusetts. And this sort of two separate gatherings. My friend Bill Holmes is going to travel with me to the home of Sally, who was a girl in second grade that generated boyish crushes on both our parts. And whenever we get together, we kid each other about Sally. And but Sally's a wonderful woman. I've seen her in adulthood as well, but I haven't seen her for quite a while. So it's going to be really fun to check in with her. And then Bill and I will be visiting with Flip Morse, who I mentioned, I think, at the tail end of the last episode. He's an old friend, and he and I were actually sort of each other's nemesis in school and high school, but we reconnected in a way that's very satisfying. And he's retired from a top job at Nintendo, and he has a website, flipmorse.com. That's FLIPMORSE.com. And he's got one album there, and there's another one I haven't been able to find yet, but nice music. I was listening to it, and Darlene said, "Ooh, I like that. It's got a lot of energy to it. The lyrics come out of his life, and he's had a lot of tough life experiences as well as wonderful ones. So that's a musical tip." And Darlene was kidding me just now at lunch, and says, "So it's going to be Flippy and Billy and Sally and Lenny getting together in Concord today." I said, "Yep, you got that right." And we'll see how much of a undertow pulls us back to whoever we were in second grade as opposed to who we are in our 70s. And I think that tension between the two points in our lives is going to be entertaining at the very least. So looking forward to it. That's it for the Kindle Chronicles from Cambridge, Massachusetts. Thanks for listening. Thanks for traveling with me all these years of following the Kindle. And I can't talk about something that arrived here yesterday that I'm going to be giving a lot of attention to. I think up until about November 30th is when the embargo will be lifted on talking about it, doing reviews. But if you're listening to the show, you probably know what I'm talking about. And that's going to be really fun. Have a great day. Bye.